house, and they work in a way that you get 80% of your heat from outside and 20% from the electricity grid to drive the pump. So air conditioners are really good heaters. That's especially important in Victoria. The other thing is that most of the air conditioners out there are about using twice as much electricity as the best ones on the market. So it's actually worthwhile, even from an economics perspective, for a consumer, if they don't know it, if they haven't got an inverter air conditioner, like a modern Japanese unit, to retire their old one, put a new one in there, and it'll probably pay itself off in under 3 years for most people. AGL's big dream is to have, our dream is to be zero emissions in a decade. AGL's dream is to have 20,000 megawatts of new gas. So, sorry, 30,000 megawatts of gas. So I'm not into AGL's dream of 30,000 megawatts of gas, but obviously that's why they're out there telling everyone that solar's costing the poor, because they want to get their gas stream. And with solar in the market, there's too much excess electricity. There's not enough money for them to. There's not enough money to be made for them to install CCGTs. So it's a crowding out thing. You either get renewables or you get gas. You can't have both. It's one market or the other. And this is the one I was going to tell you about biofuels. Now, the person who did this chart was a bit optimistic that this car is a very lightweight electric vehicle, but now I'm going to redo the chart to include the Nissan Leaf, which is a real electric vehicle that's entered markets in Japan and the US. Over 20,000 have been sold since mid last year, and this is this 1 square hectare of land. If it's covered in photovoltaic tracking panels, that same land, if it was with wheat or corn, would drive a cellulosic ethanol. So that's second generation ethanol that's not even on the market yet. 22,500 kilometres, and that's using an internal combustion engine, or a biodiesel vehicle, 21,000 kilometres, or something really fancy you make into biogas, which increases the cost, 67,000 kilometres. But the Nissan Leaf, from that amount of electricity, using a lithium-ion battery, will go 1.5 million kilometres. So 1.5 million kilometres from the same land area, and that's because the drivetrain is so much more efficient. So you don't want to be using that sort of land and going, a 30th of the distance. You're going to use that sort of land for mobility, for transportation. I'm going to prefer driving electric trains along, they're far more efficient because it's going to be a vehicle. You want to be getting 30 times the value for your land, and that is to get the vehicle, an electric vehicle propelled along, not a biofuel vehicle. So it should be opposed to biofuel vehicles. In New South Wales now, the Liberal government's just announced a mandatory ethanol blending at 10%. You wouldn't want to go beyond 10%. We don't need an ethanol industry greater than that. There's obviously a role for some biomass in chemical industries, like in industrial processes, and some range extending of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles for people who live in remote areas in regional Australia and people for their second cars. But to run the entire fleet of internal combustion engine cars on biomass is ludicrous. So I'll just leave you with this. We can install 1 square metre of mirror surface and not burn 20 tonnes of coal over the life of that mirror. And that's the economic life, 30 years. There's no reason why the mirror is not alive and working away in 60 years. Or we can choose to not install the mirror, and then we're choosing to install that coal, all the local pollution and climate change that goes with it. So it's our choice. So consider that. Our government and the rest of the community are choosing the mirror or the coal. So in order to do what we do, to be able to coordinate our over 500 volunteers, 300 volunteer researchers and a couple of hundred public speakers and some media people, we need more of you, more helpers, more people who are working in coordination, more people who are working in the teams, and of course we need to be funded. So we're not funded by government, we're not funded by grants, we're funded by our ordinary baseload supporters, so the people who give us $25 a month make up the bulk of our funders. We get a little bit of philanthropy, but basically it's donations, and that's how we operate. That's how we employ our research directors who coordinate. Each of them coordinate at least 15 volunteers. That's how we employ Emma, who looks after Queensland, we've got Emma here on a grant, and the idea is to get enough donations so that we can keep Emma for the following year. So if you really want to have the ability to have a solid representation of what we want, which is a renewable power 21st century, then come on board and support us either as a volunteer, financially or both, if that's something you can do. So I encourage you to get behind Emma and get behind Beyond Zero Emissions so that we can continue to get the story out there and to improve our research until finally it's taken up by government and industry and the Australian public. Thanks.
Wow.
Questions. I was going to start first. Matthew, obviously you put years of preparation and effort into this presentation and Beyond Zero, and what keeps you motivated?
I think it's the exciting things going on overseas mostly. Not a lot of it's here on shore, but I know it's coming soon. So seeing the price of solar panels go down by 70% in 3 or 4 years, does that mean we're winning? Because there's a big misunderstanding that Germany's subsidising these really inefficient panels on roofs, but what they're actually subsidising is a scale up so that they can build bigger manufacturing plant, become more efficient, and the costs drop. And that's how renewables work. So over time, fossil fuels have always been going up. Anyone knows that. It goes to a petrol bowser, but they're always paying more for their petrol. I remember paying 9 cents a litre for my LPG in my car when I first started driving, and I'm not that old. And now in Melbourne I pay 68 cents for that same LPG. So it's a significant increase. So all of you have had that experience, and any Australian has. Whereas renewable power, everyone knows has come down in price, because if any of you had considered the solar system 10 years ago, you'd know that you would have been up for $20,000 or $30,000 for what you could get for less than 10 today. So that is really exciting, and to hear things like Germany doing 3,000 megawatts in December during Christmas break is really exciting. To see Denmark choosing to go 50% wind is exciting. To see what's happening in Europe, what's happening in South America, what's happening in Middle East and North Africa, even some of the stuff in the United States is fantastic. And I know that we're not that hopeless, and that we can do those things here too. I do feel a little bit sad that we're freeloading and we're not helping getting the costs down. Because that's what's happening. You need to install a small amount of capacity at a higher price, and this is exactly what the Germans say in the preface to their Renewable Energy Sources Act. You're installing a smaller amount at a higher price so that you can install a whole lot more at a lower price. And what we're doing is we're basically freeloading by not being part of that, because what we're going to do, if everything goes the way of renewables coming down the price curve, we're going to start deploying all the stuff in 3 years' time when it's just completely in the money. And I'm thinking PV there, and wind will come shortly after, and then after that solar thermal. And we're going to score all the benefits, and the Europeans are going to pay for that. Now, one sort of childish way or completely selfish way of looking at it is to say, well, they're really stupid, they're doing that. Or another way of looking at it is saying, well, it's actually really unfair that they have to wear all the costs of getting us our cheap new energy future, which is not only an energy future for us, but one for our geopolitical safety and security. I mean, we're sitting on all this energy, and all these other countries are energy starved. It might look good financially, but it makes when people are energy hungry, then they go on expeditions. So what Germany's doing is a fantastic foreign aid program where you're actually creating energy autonomy, which means you don't have a need to go and invade countries, you don't have a need to leave home. You're also creating a case where people in Nepal or India can have medicines, refrigerated medicines, because they can still afford solar. And they can afford that because Germans put solar panels on their roofs. Whereas when we do foreign aid, we go out and say, well, we'll offer someone a bridge or something, but it comes hooked with an Australian construction company and all this money flying back to Australia, which is kind of cheating foreign aid, whereas Germans just want to put panels on their own roofs. And that is a huge foreign aid effort, and a real one. So, I hope, and unfortunately the Germans aren't accounting that on their foreign aid budget. They should be saying, drawing their chest and saying, actually we've spent an extra 5% on foreign aid or whatever, because that's what they've done. That's great, and so we'll get there. But I think that I would like to, my success would be that we do this earlier, We don't spend a whole lot of money on building gas infrastructure, because that would just mean that billions of dollars go out from Australia. Like it's causing, and the export business, which is selling out manufacturing and selling out education, the academic industry with all the foreign students, it's selling out manufacturing. All the manufacturing is attritioning overseas. That's because of the high dollar. So we don't go down that path. We embrace 21st century economy. We embrace computers and iPhones and Android phones and tablets and all the other things in the 21st century economy, but we seem to be hell-bent on running it like all we've got is steam trains. So yeah, let's make the shift.
Does anyone have any questions?
Are you aware of any solar PV farming that works in conjunction with collecting all the rain that falls on those collectors and virtually doubling or tripling the rainfall for that 100-acre farm or whatever?
At this stage, there's only been a couple of solar thermal plants in Spain that have been looking at co-use. They're looking at that being a better option for the future, where they can co-locate something on the same site. The initial projects that have gone out have been pretty much fence off the area, and it's now an industrial site. It's now a solar plant. So you find maybe some native grasses and stuff underneath where they haven't got the roads, but you're not seeing sort of co-uses. But I think collecting the water, I've heard of as a possibility, where they want to. Power plants still use a significant amount of water for the steam system and blowing through, so there's no corrosiveness and stuff like that. So I've heard that I think you're collecting the water on the stove panels at night and things like that when it's raining, and then being able to use that on site instead of actually using, say, bore water or tapping into a domestic supply or a farming supply, agricultural source of water. So yeah, I think that's something that's being considered. Obviously it adds some infrastructure cost, and that it's always weighed up because you've got to actually plumb that water. You know, pipe it somewhere, and there's also joints in terms of like there's tractors, so that's a tiny bit of complexity, but not huge.
Matthew, to me and I think to lots of folks interested in this, the politics in Australia and in our state of alternative energy and the climate change policy are perverse and impossible to understand. Could you say something to help us understand what's really going on from your experience interfacing with politics?
Well,
excuse me, can you repeat the question?
Okay, so it's a question on saying that the current state of politics in Australia is kind of bizarre and a bit confusing, and it's hard to put a finger on where things stand and the state of things and why they are the way they are, and my perspective on that. Is that a good paraphrase? Yeah. So, look, I can't know for sure. I'm going to sort of have a pretty strong feeling about this because you'd have to be in so many places at once to be able to definitively answer this. But my belief is that if you look at the countries that are a bit similar to us, Canada's another example in terms of very negative public campaigns against action in this area and all that goes with that. They tend to be net fossil fuel exporting countries. So countries that have banked on digging up resource and that kind of resource and shipping it out.